Hey everybody, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen here, leading the movement for movement, and I want to talk about the confusion around warm-ups and cool-downs and breaks and what we can call the space between and the space utilized when we are providing fitness programs for our autism and neurodivergent population. So I often get questions around what about doing warm-ups and then what about a cool down afterwards, and how long should the break period be? How much time does the athlete need in between sets of different exercises? And these are all really good questions, and it comes down to something that I like to refer to as training math. And before I get started, please definitely subscribe and share these videos with someone for whom it might make a difference if they're just getting started, or if you're just getting started integrating fitness programs for the autism and neurodivergent population, or if you've been doing it for 10, 20, 30 years and you want to bump up the capabilities and the enhancement of those programs, all right here. So when we talk about warm-ups and cool-downs, let's start there. So warm-ups are something that I used to incorporate into my programs as well. So we used to do a 5 to 10 minute mobility warm-up before we would get to our power and strength exercises. And it's something that for years and years I thought was necessary in all of my athletes' programs. And then through time, I started to notice two things. Number one, in the latest and best research in the field of exercise science, warm-ups have not been demonstrated to really enhance performance in the more challenging exercises to come in the session. And the other thing that they don't really do, and this is really important to understand, is injury prevention. Like, a mobility warm-up is no more likely to provide any injury prevention than starting with a couple light sets of that strength exercise or that power exercise itself. More on that in a little bit. So what is the purpose of doing a warm-up then? Well, if we're preparing the body for more challenging movement to come, that's fine, but we don't want to spend additional time that we could be using in a more advantageous way to incorporate a bunch of different, stretches and mobility drills. The mobility drills might have their place, but really we're talking about maybe a few repetitions before we get started. And again, it's wholly unnecessary with respect to injury prevention or increasing mobility. You know what really increases the mobility? When our athletes are doing their strength training exercises through a full, healthy range of motion. Now, when I say that, we have to be careful. Also, as a side note, because many of our autism and neurodivergent, and especially individuals with Down syndrome, are going to have hypermobility. So why do we want to increase mobility in people who already have too much of it? That's an important thing. So the warm-up, instead of doing a whole mobility warm-up and stretching, which again, stretching is not doing the thing that a lot of us initially thought that it was doing years and years ago. A decade or two ago, we thought, stretching as a warm-up to prevent injury. It simply does not do that. In fact, if you want to stretch after the workout, okay, but is there a massive benefit to stretching after a workout? Not really either. So the stretching component is really unnecessary in the program for our autism and neurodivergent individuals, and it takes time away from more important, effective, beneficial things that we can be doing during that session. So then we talk about a cool down on the other side of the workout. Do we really need a cool down after somebody's been exerting themselves for a while? So our athletes do their power and their strength workout, or strength exercises, and then, we need some type of cool down. That can be okay if the athlete needs it from a psychological, emotional perspective. So if they've just done a lot of strenuous and vigorous physical activity, strength training, they've done their push-ups, their overhead presses, their squats, their heavy carries, a cool down period of just, sitting and quasi meditating or just walking around is fine. It's not really going to have any major effect on physical recovery. What will have the most effect on physical recovery is getting your steps in for the day and then eating, a nice high protein meal afterwards and getting sufficient sleep. So the cool down isn't really necessary from a physical perspective. If the athlete needs it in terms of transitioning away from the exercise session and just a little, a couple seconds of, deep breathing and then even a debrief of the session, just talking out, okay, we're finishing your strength session right now, and now the next thing you're going to do is this. So in transition or in supporting the athlete with, we're done with this, we're doing this next, that's totally fine. But the cool down from, again, a physical perspective, it's not really going to enhance recovery at all. Getting more steps in throughout the day will, getting adequate sleep will, getting appropriate nutrition is going to, but the cool down is kind of a thing of the past, same thing as the warm-up. Now, where warm-ups can and should be implemented is in the actual training session itself. So if we have an athlete who is doing all of our foundational strength movements, our squats, push-ups, I say our, like we invented them, we didn't. So they're doing squats, presses, push-ups, band rows. If they are using a moderate to significant amount of weight, and that's going to vary depending on age and ability level, then we may have the athlete do a couple of warm-up sets, 1 or 2, in order to prepare for more challenging weight coming later. But this is only when an athlete is at what we might refer to generally as an intermediate or more advanced level of performance. So here's a way to look at it, or here's a way to put it into practice. If an athlete is going to be using the same amount of weight or the same amount of resistance or is at the same level of challenge with an exercise from the first set to the last set, then they probably don't need a specific warm-up set for that. I'll give an example. I have an athlete who is doing kettlebell deadlifts with a 53-pound kettlebell. Because a 53-pound kettlebell is an appreciable amount of weight, I have him start off with a 25-pound kettlebell and then moving to a 34-pound kettlebell. Because we may not want to have the athlete just jump from nothing to that 53-pound kettlebell. Doing 1 or 2 warm-up sets can help to prepare the body, those specific muscles, the hamstrings, the glutes, even the lats and the grip for that greater challenge that's going to be coming a couple of sets later. So there's a situation in which, yeah, it warrants a warm-up set or 2, but we don't need to do 5 or 6 warm-up sets, just a couple to prepare the body, right? When athletes need substantial warm-up sets is if they're using a lot of weight, and that's when we're talking about, kind of that strength and even into powerlifting type of programming where we're looking at 1 to 4, maybe 1 to 5 reps. But most of our autism and neurodivergent athletes are not doing a program anywhere near close to that. We're doing fundamental movement patterns for anywhere between, on average, 8 to maybe 15 repetitions, which means that the weight is going to be light to moderate. So the athlete is probably not going to need that many warm-up sets in order for them to start their first and second set. The other thing that I've noticed in my own program is that many of my athletes, from the perspective of kinesthetic awareness and really getting that mind-muscle or mind-body or however you want to put it, connection going for them to perform the exercise as best as they possibly can right now, they need 1 or 2 sets, even if it's at their working weight. And by set 3 and 4, now it's starting to look a lot better because they've dialed into that movement. So now the movement is becoming familiar, or they are refamiliarizing themselves with that overhead press or with that band row. So sets 1 and 2 might be a little clunky, might be a little bit off. The athlete might not have their rooting or their footing. But by set 3, okay, now they're locked in and we're seeing a lot better performance. So we're better off from a training perspective, not having the athlete in the beginning of the session doing 5 or 10 minutes of different mobility and warm-up drills, we're better off having the athlete do 1 or 2 warm-up sets, or even 1 or 2 starting working sets for that exercise, and then doing a greater total amount of sets for that exercise. Again, mobility, if the exercise is being programmed and coached correctly, then mobility is part of strength training as well. If you're squatting or pulling or pushing through a full range of motion, that, my friends, is mobility as well. So it's not as though we need to separate these two. Same thing with power exercises. So we might start off with a 2-pound medicine ball with our push throws or our overhead throws or our scoop throws, and then increase the distance, which is one of the progressions that we use in our program. And then we might use a slightly heavier medicine ball for sets 2, 3, and 4, so we can warm up with a slightly less weight and then work into our working sets. The other factor here, and I spoke about training math earlier, is that we are often limited on time. Really, how many times a week are you working with your athlete? How many sessions are we running with that athlete? Are we talking about 3 sessions a week, which is right around optimal, even 4? Or are we talking about 1 session a week for 35 minutes? If we're talking about 1 session a week for 35 or 45 minutes, wasting our time doing, warm-up and mobility drills, if they are not necessary, is going to be a detriment to the program overall, because now we don't have as much time to incorporate the exercises that are really going to be meaningful, that are going to develop strength and stability and motor skills that are going to generalize to activities of daily living. So in our program, we want to focus on those 2 main capabilities, so those 2 main phases of exercise. Our power, so the production of force, that's our medicine ball throws, our sandbell slams, and then our strength exercises. So our squats, pulls, pushes, hinging, and then carrying stuff, and spend the majority of our time, especially if we're limited on sessions, 1 to 2 a week, on those exercises. If our athlete needs a warm-up because they are pushing or pulling or squatting more weight, the warm-up should be that same movement pattern, just done with less weight, or focusing on technique in those first 1 or 2 sessions. All right. So is a warm-up necessary? No. Is a cool-down necessary? No. Do we want to take that time to go over the program strategy with our athletes? Yeah, in the beginning. So that can be considered the warm-up. Dogs barking at the outside. It's probably, it's either delivery or it's mail or it's nothing at all. Thanks, guys. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful for you. Again, the warm-up, unnecessary. The cool down, unnecessary. We can use that time to go over the program with the athlete. We can use that time to complete their visual schedule or their board, and let the athlete know what they've accomplished that day. Ask them what felt really good, what exercise they felt like was their best. But really, for the most part, warm-ups and definitely cool-downs are a thing of the past. We want to get into the program as soon as we can get into the program, so that we can have more overall volume, sets and repetitions, more training and coaching time for our athletes, so they are developing these skills. So eventually, and here's the last way to think about it, eventually, if that athlete is working up to squatting with a 20-pound or a 30-pound weight, they're going to need more warm-up sets with that weight. So we're going to be spending more time on that exercise, doing the warm-up set with just body weight, and then doing the warm-up set with just 5 pounds or just 10 pounds, and then getting into our working sets. That's great. It also takes up more time in the session, so we want to use the majority of our session with those strength training exercises. So getting to the most important stuff as quickly, as efficiently, as effectively as possible, without incorporating all of these things that are, I will call them, relics of the past. And, that's the progress of exercise science. That's the progress of any science, is we figure out what works, we figure out what doesn't work, we figure out what makes sense, both from a general and an individualized perspective, and we continue to refine our approach to have the best possible outcome for our athletes and our programs as a whole. I would love to know what you think here. Does this have you, thinking about or revising your own programming? I'd love to answer your questions as well. It's one of my favorite parts of this job. So leave those in the comments below. If you have a topic you'd like me to cover in a future edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, leave that in the comments below also. Again, there's stuff that I love to answer. I want to help you out so that we can bring effective and meaningful fitness programs to all neurodivergent individuals around the world, and that brings me to the Autism Fitness Certification. Anywhere you are, the Autism Fitness Certification is there for you. So if you're ready to join the movement for movement and become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, go to autismfitness.com. You can download the course syllabus, you can register and start your journey today. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement, and thank you for watching.